I'm Dave.
This is Lawless. And this is Ska. So, hello. Welcome back yet again. We are here with a good friend of ours. I use that term loosely. Good and friend. Andrew. He's leaving in a little while to move away to Portland. Before he does, we figured we'd take him into our lair here and have him talk about some of his favorite music, Ska. This week, we are going to be talking about Chris Murray and the 4-track adventures of Chris Murray.
Actually, by the time this podcast probably airs, I'll be in Portland.
Very true.
This is like time travel.
You're going to go back in time.
Right.
Back in time. Okay.
We're going to go back in time to 1996.
Enough of
What?
that.
Oh, come on.
No singing.
You know that was golden.
Ugh.
Comedy gold there, people.
Yeah.
Comedy fool's gold.
So, Chris Murray. Chris Murray is...
The reason I moved to California.
Really? That's one of the reasons you moved to California is Chris Murray was here?
It was one of the criteria.
One of the driving forces?
Because when I moved out here, there was a weekly ska show called Bluebeat Lounge. And I had come out on a couple of visits and shown up, and it was always great. The Phenomenauts were playing one night, which was funny because, you know, that's not a ska band, but they're just so great.
Well, what year was that? What year did you move out to L.A.?
I moved out in 2005, but the Phenomenauts played there in 2004 when I saw them.
Well, Chris Murray in 2003, here in L.A., he had moved here sometime, just a few years before that. Him and Brian Dixon from the Aggrolites and others had come up with this idea to host a weekly ska-focused club at what was then the Knitting Factory on Hollywood Boulevard. It was an amazing club. It's dearly missed because for many, many reasons. And if you never were there, never got to go there, that's sad because it was still to this one of the greatest clubs ever. Nice people that ran it. Great venue, great sound.
You were
great
just
park.
like 3 blocks away from the Mann's Chinese Theater.
Yeah.
In Hollywood, you know, the stars are on the
Yeah, it was right there on Hollywood Boulevard where when you talk about Hollywood, this is right where. So it was really nice. And it started out as Chris and Brian and a couple other people going, look, you know, he wants to do a weekly club. He wants to support the scene. He wants to get more bands into the scene. Wants to have a venue for him to play his music. And so they started this club, and each week it was very simple. There was 3 bands. It was $5 to get in. It was all ages. And it could be so diverse as Chris Murray, who at this time, you know, obviously Chris Murray is known to be the acoustic ska man. And it could be even a punk band, a ska band, just something. There was 3 local bands that were playing.
Well, not necessarily local.
Well, yeah, right. I mean, sooner, you know, local or not, it was just 3 bands that be coming in. At some point, he had enough money and enough people coming that he could have touring bands stop in. You know, the first show there at the Bluebeat Lounge was one of the original Jamaican foundation artists, Raz Michael and the Sons of Negus. So your first show is setting the tone of being this place where you can come and see a new young band as well as an older Jamaican artist for $5. And it was amazing and beautiful. We were all ecstatic to be there. So that's kind of where the Chris Murray and Bluebeat Lounge was at that time. So that's why you came out, for, you know, because you knew that this club was going on, you know, on a weekly basis.
The amount of editing work in Colorado, I got laid off.
Dave's an editor, by the way. He's a TV and film editor, and so he's...
Like, I knew that there was more editing work out here, plus there was a ska scene and a scooter scene.
Made perfect sense for you to come out this way and be here.
Yep.
What about you, Andrew?
Mine was slightly different.
Because you guys moved out about the same time.
Yeah.
We moved out within months of each other, but my story is slightly different. I mean...
Other than your Enya past that we bring up.
Well,
yeah.
You know what her last name is?
I don't care.
Right, yeah. I don't. That was never a question.
Face, but that's okay.
Still don't care.
Still not caring.
So, as you may have heard in a prior episode that, you know, I was street teaming for the Pie Tasters, and in 2004, Chris Murray put on a really big ska concert at the Knitting Factory called the Summer of Ska. And
this is the Knitting Factory here.
Yeah, in Hollywood, right.
Because there's actually a Knitting Factory in New York City.
Yeah.
Which I got to see the Scatolites. The first time I ever went to New York City, I saw the Scatolites at the Knitting Factory.
That's pretty cool.
They just happened to be playing the weekend that I was in New York City for the first time. It was just... It was magical. It made me want to cry.
But he's weeping for all of you right
I
now.
am
He's
weeping.
literally weeping, and that happens a lot, more than you would often think. But anyways, back to Andrew's story.
Yes.
So, I mean, my experience was a little bit different from Dave's because, living in Charleston, South Carolina, I was aware of LA ska scene pretty much solely through various message boards like Dancing Mood or OC Ska's message boards. And I knew people out here, but I only knew them in terms of interacting with them impersonally through a message board. But I wasn't really aware of what bands were involved, who were the major players out here in Los Angeles, until in 2004 I came out with the Pie Tasters, who performed. Chris Murray put on this major concert called the Summer of Ska in August 2004.
That was all 3 rooms at the Knitting Factory.
And that was like one of the first times that, they were using like all 3 rooms at the Knitting Factory. The original lineup of Streetlight Manifesto, and you had MU330 and Pie Tasters and possibly Voodoo Glow Skulls, but at some point, if you're hanging around the Pie Tasters, you'll just wind up wasted. So 11 years on, my memory's a little fuzzy, but
That's probably the first time I saw the Pie Tasters, was at that thing, to be honest with you, when they did that big thing. Was I DJing that?
I can't remember.
Wow,
think so.
way to name drop, Jason.
Yeah.
No, I'm trying to
think
remember.
I was DJing.
I think
that.
I was.
I'm trying to remember what that was.
I may have been spinning records.
I think I may have been the person that put that on.
I may have been sweeping the floor.
I hate you both. Really? Really?
But,
Seriously? I may have been sweeping the floor. Wait till Dave gets to the point, the one time he DJ'd at the Knitting Factory, okay? He's going to bring that up. I know he is.
No, that's a whole other podcast.
I DJ'd like 3 times at the Knitting Factory. It was all because of you. Tough guy.
So that was really, I had my first Chris Murray album was Raw in 2002, and then it's weird for like people like you, Jason, that grew up in Los Angeles, but when I first met Chris Murray, like I was genuinely starstruck. I was like, this is Chris Murray, and I've heard so much about him. And
Well, because Chris Murray obviously had a career before he got to just be in LA. He was from Canada. He had King Apparatus, which did a lot of touring, a lot of 3 albums, a lot of different things. So he's already well known. And then, so you come here, and he's still touring. He's still Chris Murray. He's releasing other albums.
I got see Chris Murray come through Denver. So I bought marbles when he came through Denver, and then when he released 4-Track Adventures, I saw him on that tour, and it was great. And so, like, I lucked out in that his whole solo career, I've kind of been along for the ride.
Yeah.
So, like, when I saw that Chris Murray had a ska club in LA, I knew what...
Like, I got to go there. That's where I need to be.
Meant.
So that you came out, Andrew, and you were out here with the Pie Tasters, and you just kind of saw how LA was. And
yeah, exactly. And to me, it was like, oh, well, coming from Charleston, South Carolina, where I was probably going to like 2 or 3 ska shows a year. Very few bands would come to Charleston. Is very remote, so very few bands would come to Charleston. You would either have to go to Columbia or Myrtle Beach or Charlotte, and drive hours to go see, a ska band. And, it's like, oh, well, this goes on every week. It's like, oh, okay.
How is this possible? What is going on?
So I really wanted to be a part of that. So from August 2004, I moved out 8 months later in April 2005.
I beat you.
And
So I was out here in February.
2 months.
Now children.
So, I mean, that, to me, it's kind of strange if you grew up in California and, you saw Hepcat in 92 or you saw No Doubt in 89. To me, it was all new, and that's what's made it exciting for me. And this really was, Bluebeat Lounge was essentially Chris Murray's brainchild.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it absolutely was his way. He was living here. He had released a couple albums. He was really looking for somewhere to just kind of put a base and have this club going so he could obviously make money and continue playing and have this base to kind of grow the scene. We've had this discussion before where you guys moved out here at a perfect time for ska music, specifically in LA. The scene right now and the bands that are playing right now, it's a little dry. Before Chris Murray started the Bluebeat Lounge, you had Steady Beat, but from late 90s till late 2000s, Steady Beat, which had been releasing all of the local traditional ska bands from Mobtown and Allenton's and C-Spot and Ocean 11 and all these acts, was sort of underground at that time. He had kind of stopped doing things for the most part. Before Chris came on, we had shows, but it was also sort of a dry period. So Chris comes in, moves here. He's been here for, 8 years now. Starts this club, and right away was like, oh, this is great. We got a bunch of stuff going on again. And that's when you guys move here, and we have a scooter scene going on. We have a weekly. At that time, you could almost see a different ska night again very quickly. At the same time, there's all kinds of stuff going on again, so it was really good.
Well, I think that the historical context, I think, is important. Because, third wave of the 90s, really the heyday for a lot of these bands all over the U.S., not just in Los Angeles. And then around 2000, things start drying up nationwide. And even in L.A., it just wasn't quite the same. And then somehow Chris reignited that spark.
So, Chris Murray created this community that I think still... And that's kind of how we... That's how we all met. I mean, we're all together because of the Bluebeat Lounge. I think there's a lot of people right now in L.A. that are friends because of the Bluebeat Lounge. So it was something very special. It was something amazing. We're not here to talk about the Bluebeat Lounge per se, but kind of give you some backstory on why it is that we are here and what it is. We're here to talk about his first solo record, first full length, I should say, because he did have a little 6-song EP, but...
The 4-track adventures of Venice Shoreline Chris.
Very true. Exactly.
I had seen him with the King Apparatus, and then in between Mustard Plug and Let's Go Bowling, some hippie got up on the stage with a guitar and started strumming, and I'm just like, screw this, I am out of here. And then he starts with a King Apparatus song. I realized who it was, turned around, and it was awesome. To see him up on the stage with just a guitar and the way that he commanded the stage was really pretty impressive. And that came from the years of being with King Apparatus and really knowing what he was doing and what he was setting out to do. And to think at that point that a few years later, when I showed up to a show, that Chris was going to go, hey, Dave, what's going on? That's what living in L.A., man, we came at a good time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would have never imagined in my wildest dreams that... not that the ska scene is so colossally huge that you couldn't make inroads like that, but to be just kind of a ska fan and just, know people...
Well, because you've only seen him a couple times in Denver, and then you move out here, going to the club, and it was at the club, you had members of Hepcat, you had members of Acolytes, it was sort of a scene, as it should be, where people were hanging out, and you got a chance to kind of have that, one-on-one type conversations with people, and you have Chris, he's like, hey, you recognize you, and so it made you feel comfortable, and I think that's why that was such a success.
Yeah.
When was the first time you had seen him, Andrew?
In August 2004, when he put on the Summer of Ska show.
Yeah.
That was really the first time I'd seen him in person, in live, and
wow.
I definitely was, kind of starstruck, and, introduced myself to him, and he's just very personable and down to earth. Probably one of the most easygoing persons that I've ever met. I don't think Bluebeat could have come together the way it did if other musicians didn't respect Chris.
Very true, absolutely. Yeah. He did a lot of different things. So obviously, his years of touring gave him that sort of cash to just put this on, and people respect him and they know him, and that's why it was a success.
And I think part of his appeal also is that he's very passionate about the roots of ska and the roots of reggae, and I think that's really reflected on the 4-track adventures.
Yeah, very true. I think the idea behind that album as his first solo thing was literally just him and his guitar paying tribute to the original stuff and wanting to really go back to how the music started, which was Ross's an encampment with a guitar, Bob Marley sitting on the side of his house, just with an acoustic guitar, learning how to play. And that is why I think it appealed to him, because it's very, very traditional. It's just him and a guitar singing, playing this music. And I think that if you listen to the album, coming from Marbles and King Apparatus, which is a little bit more punkier, a little bit more two-tony, this very just stripped down, bare bones, heartfelt ska music, and nobody had done it. It was nobody had been really doing that.
Well, and to juxtapose this to the Pie Tasters, it's really straight ahead. Your folks could hear it. He's talking about roots of ska and how much he loves ska, and it all rings really true.
I think the interesting thing about this album, again, to give it some kind of historical context, at this time, 1995, 1996, really at the height of the third wave, you had bands that went one direction, like very roots-oriented, like Hepcat, Slackers, and then you had the punkier side, like your Real Big Fish and your No Doubt. So to have an album that was totally stripped down, acoustic ska, which is virtually unheard of.
No, it was unheard of. Yes, people had played acoustically, but to have a whole album. I remember when it came out, a lot of people were like, what? No, nah, that's not ska. It can't work. It was a little weird even to us. Even.
Where are the trumpets?
Right, yeah, exactly.
Where's
the horn section?
I think you nailed it. Like, I remember looking at it and going, what?
Right,
like,
yeah, how does this work?
Like,
there's no way. No, forget you. This isn't the Skylight. This isn't Hepcat. This isn't even, third wave. So there's no. But then you listen to the album, and it's such good songwriting, amazing to listen to. It really was like, wow, that is refreshing because, like you said, Andrew, at that time, you're at the height of the third wave stuff with just all the punk reggae or punky ska stuff and the No Doubt and, all of this really hardcore things going on. And you're just like, wow.
Mighty Boss Tones.
Yeah, exactly.
America's Funniest Home Videos.
Just all of this, nice poll, by the way. All of this really hyper energetic stuff, and you just have this stripped down guy, all of like Toots and the Maytals, just with a guitar, singing these songs about love and lost love and a train station, his love of New York. And so, yeah, it really was like, wow, that's awesome.
Well, I think the thing that's interesting about this album is, the opening track is Rock Steady, which is I would not quantify that song as what I call the hook. Like when I used to do my podcast, it was important that each episode started with what I'd call the hook. If you're going to listen to a 60-minute episode of a podcast, you got to hook your audience right away. But it definitely sets the tone for the album. And when he says, I don't want to change the world tonight, but that's exactly what he ended up doing. I mean, he completely changed what ska music could be, and it He changed everything. Yeah. I mean, the Bluebeat Lounge changed everything.
Rock steady, steady with me, will you? Rock steady, steady with me, darling. Rock steady, steady with me, coming. Rock steady, steady with me, darling. I don't want to change the world tonight. Just tell me if it feels right, darling. This moment can never repeat. Will you rock steady, steady with me?
I think that I would argue that Rock Steady is a hook. Like, I think that's one of, as far as the solo Chris Murray stuff, I think that's one of the really solid...
I feel it's more of like a statement of purpose. He opens with this album called Rock Steady, and it's a very heartfelt sort of like, this is what I'm doing, this is the music I love, this is what I'm playing. And you're right, it's a very popular tune for a lot of people. You know, it's played in every set. It always plays Rock Steady.
And it's one of those where it may not be your favorite song, but a lot of people it is. Yeah. But even if it's not your favorite song, he would be remiss if he didn't play it.
Yeah,
like, it'd be
absolutely.
Like, did he not play Rocksteady? It's like,
But like I said, for me,
I want my $5 back.
Yeah. This place is a ripoff.
For me, it's like I said, it's that sort of call to action of like, Rocksteady, we're playing this music, this is what I'm trying to do, and it ready to run. The second track on there, All Night Dinah, is just there's no vocals on it, but he's got this organ laid over it, and it's very much in the vein of like that late 60s early 70s, organ-drenched, so what they call skinhead reggae or vintage reggae kind of stuff.
It's very reminiscent of King Apparatus and some of the stuff that they were doing.
Yeah.
It's a great track.
Yeah, it is. I mean, as your second follow-up, there's no vocals, it's just him playing the guitar and this organ, and I think it's just one of those other tracks that's like, wow, this is fun, this is exciting. It sounds traditional, but it's just acoustic, and there's not these big horn lines, and yet it's still ska, and they still want to dance to it.
Right.
Sammy Come of Jail is probably one of my favorite songs on the album.
Hit me from the top. Hit me from the top.
I think Chris Murray is probably the only white person who could successfully pull off a Jamaican patois.
and have it sound sort of traditional.
And have it sound authentic and meaningful. I mean, this is a great song. It's kind of that throwback to the rude boy culture.
Well, and it's funny to be able to do it and be true enough that it doesn't sound like you're faking Jamaican.
Right. Yeah. No. True. Yeah. At this track definitely showcases where he's coming from of paying tribute and being traditional enough to those early sounds. That early rocksteady. Absolutely. It sounds like a track that could have been recorded back in the 60s almost, because it's lo-fi. And if you didn't know any better, you might think that it was. I mean, really well. And it absolutely is one of those tracks that any of those artists could have recorded. After Sammy Come of Jail, Confidant, you jump right into one of his signature tunes. Ex-Darling is a signature tune for him, for ska, for everything that is Chris Murray and Shoreline Chris.
Ex-Darling, forget about calling. For to sleep, not in love, tonight is where I'm falling. So give up your snarling. Don't waste your words of love on me, and don't come back crawling. No.
Ex-Darling is the type of song where he could play it later in his set and the crowd would just get this second wind of energy, and it's just a very high energy, up-tempo song that really gets the crowd moving.
Talking about Lost Love, which is on this set of tunes, features heavily love, lost love, things that are really important to him, and things that have affected him.
And then you move on to Solomon. In terms of referencing back to original ska, there were a lot of spiritual covers and spiritual music in the early ska years.
Absolutely, that's a very good point. Every Toot song is very founded in the church. It came up in the church. A lot of it is very spiritual music. Any of those, we're talking about religion, being a Rastafarian, that's your religion, and so a lot of that early stuff, and here is a song that he makes that harkens back to those types of psalms that were sung in churches. Just the way he sings it is almost like he's singing in a church with a bunch of people.
The song works in terms of the album, but it's giving you a history lesson, and it's kind of leading you down the road to looking back to why he would put this song on this album. Yeah. And it's because the roots are there, and you just need to look deeper into the roots.
Solomon was wise. He had many wives. He told the truth from lies and lived a happy life till somebody take it from him. So if you step into the night, try keeping out of sight. For he who have the sharpest knife, he lived the longest life till somebody take it from him. And are you still mean, lying there on the street? Another chalk ring begins to
love to me.
Really? Really?
So here's another song about heartbreak.
Let's count.
Yes. Bring your love to me.
Andrew's gone Muppet.
Yeah.
I have
1, 2, 3.
2 songs about heartbreak.
You're an idiot.
So shortly off the heels of Ex-Darling, here's another song, you know. I can't seem to get you off my mind. I've been missing one I left behind.
Telling me no, oh, I can't seem to get you off my mind. I've been missing what I left behind. Wondering, oh, could we work things out? Now I've learned about what life's about. Bring your love to me. Bring your love to me. Bring your love to me.
Is he talking about a person? Is he talking about King Apparatus? We don't know.
Hey, I don't
But,
know.
Well,
I'm gonna go with the girl.
yeah.
Or
It's probably
Lost Girl.
I'm going to take a quick aside and talk about Home for a second. Even though Home
that's
isn't.
not on this
Well,
album.
I know, but
What? No.
That's why it's an aside.
I'm taking it aside.
Okay.
It was really funny because I played Home for the kids really like Home, and to explain the dual meaning of home to a 5 and a 3-year-old, they don't understand the concept of home being a place, but it's also a feeling. I hadn't realized how hard that song was working at making that analogy until I had to explain it to my kids.
Yeah.
And that's a great song. It's not on this album.
Why? Thank you
but-
for sharing. No.
Well, mostly I just wanted to tell Andrew that because, you know, he's moving away.
Yes.
And we don't get to talk about the sky
Right.
anymore.
It is, and Home is another signature tune for him.
Yeah.
You know, it really is one of those tunes that anyone that hears it loves it. And you bring up a good point, though. As any good songwriter writes tunes that doesn't exactly explain everything and lets the listener pull out what it means for them or how it relates to them. I think, you know, there are some songs that are specifically about this, but the best songwriters can write a song that kind of leaves things oblique or open to interpretation. And I think Chris does that very well. He's a great songwriter, and he's done that on a number of tracks that are, for one person it means something, one thing, but to somebody else it could mean a completely different thing. And none of them are wrong. It's how you interpret that song, and that's important. That's a great songwriter.
I've raised the dust on 10,000 streets, worship the earth with the soles of my feet. I've roamed around all the days of my life, headed for someone, somewhere to arrive. I want to go home, I want to go home, I want to go home, but home has gone away. Young and foolish.
What's the last song? Is there
Cooper Station Blues.
One of your favorite songs.
I love this tune.
I want to talk to you today about Moon Records. I sent them a tape that I had made about a month ago. I said that the band is breaking up, I'm trying to go so low. The man on the phone called back to say that Mr. Bucket said no. He don't know if the rude boys like you boys will like my stuff, but he know the one-man show will never go, and the tape it sounds too rough. I know it's true, they'll never like what they never get to hear. It's been that way for ska over the years. But why should the ska world cover its ears to the sounds of my blood, sweat, and tears? When I want to play ska, I want to to play ska for all of you. I want to play ska.
As a rude boy in the 90s, I'm like, oh, he's talking about Moon Records. I totally know what he's talking
Right,
about. You know,
yeah.
it's like, oh, man. This
Once again, it's a track that has multiple meanings. You know, he's talking about a certain period, but he's also talking about a certain area for him. I think this is a very New York type song. He's talking about his experiences there and what it meant to him and how special it was. And yes, Moon and...
Well,
and,
it's so autobiographical
Yes.
to think about Chris, the man that I know now, moving from King Apparatus and being able to say, okay, well, I'm going to start solo. Well, for a ska band, you don't get to be solo.
Right, there's no solo ska bands. How do you do that? How is that possible?
A thing, really.
You don't, yeah. And you look at, after he came along, you've seen a number of people go off and do a solo thing. Jenny Wu does acoustic oi.
Las Cabriolas.
Yeah, exactly.
Dan Potas.
You know, there's any number of the people that have gone on and started to do sort of a solo thing and do it very well. I mean, Mike Park does it too. Mike Park, he's doing his solo thing when he goes out and just plays in people's living rooms. You've seen other people sort of follow that, I think, and just take that up and just really just tell stories and talk about music, but make it fun and danceable. And that's a trick. That's tough to do, and he does it very well. And it goes back to this track. For me, anyways, I love hearing him perform this track. It's one of my favorites, and it's so upbeat, so exciting. You know, even though there's some sadness tinge to it, it's still a very, like, positive song. Let's just have a good time. And
knowing Chris,
yeah,
he just, nothing gets him down. Like, he's like, yeah.
I think I've only seen Chris lose his temper like once. Someone was trying to start a fight during his set, and he jumped off the stage and broke up the fight and was, get out of here. Like, this is not
he's very laid back, but he's gotten mad before.
This is not what Bluebeat is about. This is not what ska music is about. Like, if you want to start a fight, go outside.
And that's what was great about this album. Like you said, he comes from this full band and he goes into this solo thing, and this whole album is just sort of a statement of like, okay, I'm going to try something new. Let's just put it out there and see what happens. And it's now sustained him for the past, 20 years of doing Chris Murray and being able to tour around the world as Chris Murray, as a combo, playing acoustic ska, to the masses, and it works. And it all starts with this album, right?
I think the interesting thing about this track, the album opens with Rocksteady, which is kind of a hopeful song. Come on this journey with me through this roots-oriented style of music. And then you get to Cooper Station Blues, and he's talking about, I got turned down by Moon Records, and this journey may not happen. Like, he says, I want to play ska. I want to play ska for all of you. Like, it's like, I'm Venice Shoreline Chris, and you know what? This journey may not get any bigger than me busking on Venice Boardwalk. Thank God it didn't. But it's. I think that's why it's called Cooper Station Blues. Is like, man, what if there is no market for a solo acoustic guy? In 1995.
And no one knew that. I mean, he released the album. He didn't know what was happening. So for him, it's interesting that you noticed that.
Like,
right.
It's funny, like, sitting down and really breaking it down, because, man, Chris Murray's kind of a badass. Like, that takes some stones to throw it out there like that.
Hey, Chris, you hear that? You're a badass, all right?
But
it's true. He's always been that way.
Chris was a Mountie before he got it.
He was from Canada. You never know. He's got what if he's like a secret agent?
Murray.
He's killing people.
Chris Murray.
Crown the nation.
Yeah.
But I think, especially in this song, he puts himself out there in a way that...
No, very open. Like he's bearing his soul here on this track. Absolutely. And I like what Andrew just said. You start the album sort of, like I said, that statement of purpose, but then by the end of the album, he's kind of he's opening himself and opening his, this is me, come along with me for this ride. I think that, I never noticed that.
I think this is probably one of the few songs that Chris Murray does where doubt kind of creeps in. You got to think back again, 1995, 1996, at the peak of the third wave, ska songs are being featured in movies, and here comes a guy who's like, hey, I want to put out an album where it's just me and a guitar.
Yeah, lo-fi.
Well, everybody's worried about selling out.
Yeah.
You remember that was
the
biggest thing. Like, don't sell out, oh no. After a little while, everybody's like, well, I'd like to pay my rent.
Right, yeah.
Like,
there is no selling out. It's I want to be a musician. I want to support myself. So, this idea of selling out to me, unless you completely change your style and your hairstyle and everything else, then you're maybe okay. But even then, you're like, hey, I'm a musician. I gotta play. I gotta pay my child support.
He's a magician?
Magician.
Yeah.
Hey, don't make fun of my speech impediment. Why are we friends again?
I don't know.
Jeez.
Okay, well, that's pushing in on another half an hour wasted.
Yeah. That was pretty good.
No, I thought that was real solid. And I think that it was really interesting to visit material that we're very intimate with. Like, I've spent some time listening to the Chris Murrays.
Wow. Explains a lot.
A lot of scratches on that album.
Yeah. Easy time.
You know.
I wouldn't have thought that I would have got an opportunity to really view it with fresh eyes in the same way. So thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of what this is about, is kind of just revisiting some of those old albums that we may not have listened to in a while, but were amazing. And, you know, why were they amazing? And kind of looking back on them with our old eyes and what was happening at that time. I think it's perfect.
All 12 pair of them.
Nice. Well played, sir. Okay, well, and with that, I am Dave.
I am Lawless.
And this is Ska. I want to say a big thanks to Good Question out of Syracuse, New York, and their song I Need a Hero, which is the theme under the beginning and the end of the show. And also a big thanks to my brother for helping us mix the audio. Thanks for listening.